You must know that at the end of my last sojourn on the surface of your planet, I had to make this maleficent terrestrial question the subject of my special observation and even to study it in great detail. To know approximately what results the terrestrial contemporary education of children leads to, I will tell you of just that one occurrence, which was the first cause of my subsequent special interest in the question of this terrestrial misunderstanding. Although this occurrence took place in the large community of Russia, yet nevertheless this story, which I shall now tell you, is very characteristic and gives a very good picture in general of the education of the children of their contemporary civilization. It is characteristic because in this large community Russia also, the contemporary responsible beings, especially the beings of what is called the upper ruling class, educate their children exactly as the contemporary responsible beings of the other communities breeding on the continents of Europe and America educate theirs. My account of this occurrence, which evoked in me an impulse of interest to acquaint myself specially with the question of the terrestrial education of children, I shall preface with a story of something that occurred just previously to this and which admirably illustrates the significance of this education of theirs and was also, so to say, a link in my gradually becoming interested in this question. I happened once to exist continuously for several months in the capital of this community, in the city of St. Petersburg. During my stay there, I became acquainted with an elderly couple. The man was what is called a senator, and his wife was a society lady and a patroness of several welfare institutions. I used to visit them often at their home and enjoyed playing chess with this senator, as is customary there among what are called respectable people. This elderly couple had several daughters. All the elder daughters were already settled, that is, married. Only their youngest, 12 years old, remained at home. As this couple had no further responsibilities concerning their other daughters, they decided to give this youngest daughter of theirs the very best education according to the notions of that time. And for this purpose, they placed her in a special boarding school, a higher educational establishment called an institute. This youngest daughter of theirs came home only on Sundays and for the chief holidays, and once a week on special days her father and mother used to visit her at the boarding school. I was almost always with them during the holidays, and I met this charming, as yet unspoiled girl, and sometimes even took walks with her in the neighboring what is called park. During these walks, we either joked or she told me about her lessons and her new impressions. During these meetings and conversations, a tie, something like friendship, grew up little by little between us. She was very quick in her perceptions and manifestations, or, as your favorites themselves define such persons from among themselves, an alert and thoughtful girl. My acquaintance, this senator, was sent on a certain, as they say there, inspection somewhere far off in Siberia. His wife decided to accompany him, for the senator was suffering what is called liver trouble and constantly needed care, but they could not make this joint trip because of their youngest daughter, since there would be no one to visit her at the institute and to take her home during the holidays. So, one morning, the parents, these elderly acquaintances of mine, came to see me at my apartment and asked me if I would agree to take their place with their youngest daughter during their absence, to visit her every week at the institute and to take her home with me for the holidays. I, of course, at once agreed to this proposal of theirs, and when, very soon after, the senator and his wife left for Siberia, I began punctually to fulfill the obligations taken upon myself in regard to their daughter, who had by that time become a pet of mine. Upon my first visit to this educational establishment, which existed specially for the education of children, I noticed a certain strange thing which also served as one of the causes of my subsequent observations and studies of the consequences on your contemporary favorites of that maleficence invented by them themselves. On the day of my visit to this, as they call it, genteel institution, there were many visitors in the reception room where the meetings of the parents or the guardians with their children or wards actually took place. One or two parents or guardians had only just come in. Others were already talking with their children or foster children. Others were waiting the arrival of their children, and all their attention was fixed on the door through which the pupils of that establishment usually entered. I also, after I had come into this reception room and had explained to the inspectress on duty who it was I wished to see, sat down to wait for my chance foster child. While waiting, I looked around. All the pupils of this genteel establishment were dressed alike, and all wore their hair similarly braided in two braids, the ends of which, tied with ribbons, hung down their backs. What struck my eye was a certain peculiarity in these ribbons and braids. On some of the pupils, these ribbons simply hung down the back, but on others, although they also hung down the back, yet the ends of these ribbons were tied together in a certain way. On the very next holiday, when I took my foster child home, talking with her over what is called a samovar, I asked her, "Tell me, Sonia, please, why, although the pupils of your institute dress alike in everything else, there is that peculiarity in the ends of their braids?" She immediately blushed, and without answering this question of mine, stared pensively into her tea, and only after a certain time nervously replied, "It's not just a simple thing among us. Although this is our big institute secret, yet I cannot help telling it to you, my friend, as I am quite sure that you will not give away this big institute secret of ours to anybody." She proceeded to tell me frankly as follows. The manner of tying our ribbons was intentionally devised by the pupils so that they could recognize one another. That is, know to which club a pupil belongs, and at the same time so that the class teachers and supervisors, and in general anyone not a pupil of the institute, should not know or discover the secret. All the pupils of our institute are divided into two categories. One belongs to what is called the men's club, and the other to what is called the women's club. And we recognize one another just by the manner of tying these ribbons. After this, she explained to me in detail in just what the difference between these two clubs lies. She said that as a rule, all new arrivals in the institute